300 years ago, mana spiraled out of control, and demons flooded the world. 10 heroes raised colossal barriers that kept humanity alive, and their legendary classes became the foundation of society. Year 335. Fengguan's city is alive with excitement as the awakening ceremony begins. Lin Feng, a young boy with black hair, jumps off Uncle Zhang's cart and heads into the massive crowd gathered at the testing grounds. Lines wrap around statues of the original heroes, and anxious teens whisper prayers for rare awakenings. One girl even begs the heavens for a legendary class. Lin snorts quietly. Dream big if you want, reality doesn't listen. A guy next to him explains that rumors say a new legendary class will appear this year. No wonder everyone looks desperate. Lin smirks. If everyone wants to get stronger, his sales will skyrocket. A flare shoots across the sky. The ceremony officially starts. Inside, results flash non-stop. A student named Guy exits with an S-class and 55 mana. The boy beside Lin mutters that he'd kill for that kind of power. Lin pulls out a tomato and says, "This tomato can increase your mana 5% and lasts 5 minutes. He introduces himself as a spiritual plant specialist and shows his stock: day-lasting potatoes, slimming cucumbers, strength-boosting roots. A crowd forms instantly. Some think it's a scam, others think it beats energy bars. Lin says, "Limited stock. First samples free." The skeptical boy bites in. His eyes widen as mana surges and his body lightens. Before anyone can speak, a man in a suit pushes through, recognizes academy-grade produce, and tries to buy everything. Chaos erupts as everyone demands their share. Lin finally reveals the truth: he's a max-level farmer, and his crops naturally carry buffs. Later, outside his tiny shop, the blonde man from earlier returns with a bag of produce and hands over 10 gold coins. Lin accepts, explaining he needs better fertilizer but can barely afford it. The blonde man laughs and says, "A talented guy like you stuck as a farmer?" Lin glares and tells him to go home. His aunt is waiting. Alone again, Lin sighs. Once, people called him a genius, until he awakened and entered class. His archdruid father would probably rise from the grave to yell at him. Still, Lin prefers the quiet life. Farming keeps him busy and keeps his mother from worrying. A drop hits his nose. He looks up and sees something falling. A man crashes into the ground in front of him. Lin's heart leaps. Did the city wall fail? Did demons break in? The dying man gasps out a warning. The legendary Necromancer Hizazang has betrayed humanity and plans to hand his class to the demons. A beam of purple energy strikes, killing him instantly. Lin stares in shock. A legendary class, given to the demon clan? A dark portal ripped open across the scorched ground, and out stepped the traitor, his laughter echoing through the smoke. The Necromancer coughed, glaring back, admitting that if his injuries hadn't slowed him down, he'd already be gone. But even so, he bragged, once he offered his class to the demons, he'd gained something greater, an immortal body. The Necromancer then turned, his gaze locking onto a faint movement in the shadows. Lin Feng froze. He had been inching backward, hoping to slip away without being noticed, but fate wasn't on his side. The villain's voice sliced through the silence, low and sharp, asking whether the boy thought he could leave without permission. Lin Feng barely had time to react before the enemy seized him, revealing the horrifying truth. The corpse lying there was once a famed dean, and he planned to use Lin Feng's blood as a sacrifice. The boy froze. That sinister mana pressing down on him was overwhelming. His eyes darted, desperate, until he spotted a fallen tool glinting in the dust, the weapon of the dead man. As if answering his will, one of Lin Feng's old farmer skills maxed out, awakening. The tool ripped itself from the ground and flew into his grip. "If sacrifices are happening," he muttered through gritted teeth, "it'll be you offering them." The pickaxe swung down, slicing through the air and slamming into the Necromancer's defense. The villain stumbled back, eyes wide. A farmer, hurting him? Impossible! Before the shock could fade, Lin Feng grabbed the strange hand cannon scattered nearby. He fired. A torrent of blue energy erupted forward, shaking the entire hall. The Necromancer barely managed to summon a purple shield, blocking the blast with a grunt. Smoke cleared to reveal him still standing but wounded, cracks splintering across his aura. The Necromancer's eyes darkened. He barked that the boy's body would serve his escape, his spirit twisting into a black haze that shot straight for Lin Feng. Darkness engulfed him. He screamed, chaos tearing through his body, yet a smirk curved his lips. The villain inside sneered at the boy's strength, calling it a nice vessel. But Lin Feng's voice echoed back, confident and steady. He'd trained since childhood. If this monster wanted control, he'd have to fight for it. Moments later, Lin Feng collapsed, drenched in that shadowy energy. His fingers grazed a jagged weapon buried in rubble. Fine, he growled. Then we're both going out. The Necromancer's spirit panicked, but it's too late. The weapon plunged into Lin Feng's chest, his final act of defiance. As the light faded from his eyes, he whispered for his father not to scold him too hard in the afterlife. Then, it happened. A golden flash burst from his chest, bright enough to blind the darkness itself. Inside, the Necromancer screamed. Chains of shining energy coiled around him, tightening, cocooning his spirit until it shattered in an explosion that shook the heavens. Lin Feng's eyes shot open. A system window flickered in midair, congratulating him for acquiring the Necromancer class. He blinked at his reflection, alive somehow. Control of his own body remained his. Purple energy curled around his hands as he checked his updated stats. Level 1, yet carrying a farmer's peak strength and constitution, far beyond normal human limits. His mana had multiplied, fused with something darkly potent. Curious, he focused. Green farmer mana flared in one hand, purple necrotic energy swirled in the other. The two met, merging, shuddering violently before finally sinking. His class mutated, evolving into something new. Spiritual Farm Master. A legend reborn in the fields. He glanced at the Necromancer's corpse nearby, eyes narrowing. If that lingering power still clung to him, mastering it would be crucial, or it might devour him. With a wry grin, he muttered a complaint about the ugly purple hue of his mana, then traced a circle in the air, activating his new undead summoning skill. Purple sigils pulsed, shooting beams toward the fallen bodies. In a swirl of ghostly light, the spirits of both the Dean and the Necromancer rose, now bound to him as loyal servants. They retained their skills, their power. And as Lin Feng realized the chaos this would unleash, no one would believe a farmer had taken down two high-tier mages. He needed to disappear. With a smirk, he decided his next move: find land rich enough to cultivate both crops and corpses. A place to grow stronger. By the next day, he was back on his farm. But his power hadn't settled. The Necromancer's residue lingered in his mana, subtly twisting it. On a nearby TV, a reporter droned about a professor's birthday while Lin Feng noticed something unsettling in his fields. His crops were thriving, but the glow they emitted wasn't natural anymore. The Necromancer's mana had been acting strangely all morning. Lin Feng could feel the usual purple necro energy bleeding into the bright green glow of his farming skill, and the field around him was starting to look like something out of a nightmare. Plants twitched, bulged, twisted, mutating in ways even he had never imagined. Then one sprout suddenly snapped open like a jawed trap, lunged upward, and bit straight through an unsuspecting bird passing overhead. Lin Feng froze, horrified, thinking that if anyone else saw this, they'd probably report a demon invasion on the spot. Muttering in panic, he grabbed his shovel and wrestled the mutant crop out of the soil before it could eat anything else. Still catching his breath, he stared at the writhing roots. So his new mana really could turn an ordinary plant into something that could make a demon flinch. Terrifying. But also, he realized, the kind of power that might help him grow the impossible varieties his father once dreamed of. Before he could think further, the TV in his house blared breaking news. The Necromancer Heya had rebelled, killed Dean Yue, and triggered a nationwide bounty. Lin Feng felt a chill slide down his spine. So it was all true. If anyone found out about his necromancer abilities, he'd be finished. He glanced at his two undead servants and sighed. "You'll need proper names," he muttered. "Farm hands sound normal enough, no one would question that." He almost laughed at how perfectly fitting that sounded for a spiritual farm master. A new broadcast appeared on TV, this time announcing that the Extraordinary Academy was expanding its enrollment to prepare for rising demon activity. Lin Feng's eyes glinted. The academy had everything he needed: safety, fertile land, resources. It was the perfect place to hide in plain sight. By the next day, he was standing in the academy's crowded registration plaza. When it was finally his turn, Instructor Lee squinted at him and asked for his details. Lin Feng introduced himself calmly. Lin Feng. 18. Level 1 Spiritual Farm Master. The title made the instructor frown. Sounded like some obscure support class. He demanded to see Lin Feng's aura. Lin Feng lifted his hand, revealing the bright green glow. Instructor Li burst out laughing. Just farmer aura. Worthless. Next! The line erupted in snickers, students telling him to go back to the fields, dragging out jokes about lowering the academy's standards. Lin Feng ignored them and explained that his class was mutated, his basics solid, and all he asked for was a chance. The instructor snapped, wondering aloud what kind of fundamentals, a level 1 nobody could possibly have. He waved security over. That was when Lin Feng coolly flashed the academy pamphlet, pointing out that anyone could take the exam, and even pretended to call the administration to complain. Instructor Li practically jumped over the counter to snatch the phone and shut him up. His face twisted with rage as he got in Lin Feng's face, shouting that a weakling like him could never pass. The crowd murmured that the instructor seemed extra touchy. Rumor even spread that the guy had just been demoted. Fed up, Instructor Li bellowed for anyone unwilling to take the test to get lost, then led the candidates toward the exam site. The testing area turned out to be a massive labyrinth made from ancient roots. As they arrived, the instructor sneered at Lin Feng and told him it wasn't too late to quit. Lin Feng simply thanked him. The labyrinth was already proving brutal. One candidate was sent flying by a vine thicker than a tree branch. Lin Feng crouched down, scanning the terrain with focus sharp as a blade. Clearly, this was no simple rabbit hunt. He pulled out a pouch of concentrated carrot powder, bait for demon rabbits, and murmured that he'd show everyone the true meaning of industrial agriculture. He sprinkled the powder across the ground. Soon, a small horned pink rabbit hopped out, drawn by the scent. It barely took 2 bites before Lin Feng's servants shot out from the shadows, attacking with ruthless efficiency. Watching the scene, Lin Feng realized waiting for rabbits to approach one by one would take forever. So he ordered his farm hands to round up every rabbit in the labyrinth. The 2 undead darted off like shadows, one smashing a demon rabbit with a single blow, the other trapping groups of them inside shimmering blue bubble seals. Lin Feng couldn't help thinking he truly struck gold with these 2. Then a loud bell rang. The exam was over. Instructor Li ordered everyone to turn in their rabbit horns. Several students were failed immediately for coming back empty-handed, complaining that the rabbits had been unusually scarce this round. When Lin Feng approached, the instructor scoffed, betting the trash-level farmer hadn't gotten even 1 horn. Lin Feng raised his hand and revealed a storage ring. A second later, a mountain of demon rabbits spilled out, burying Instructor Li in a furry avalanche. The crowd erupted in shock as the instructor and his assistant stared in disbelief. Lin Feng smiled casually. 500 horns. Want to count them? Instructor Li's face twisted, shouting accusations of cheating. That was when a director appeared, clearly angry, and scolded the instructor for causing trouble. He even revealed the demon rabbits were his personal pets. The director stood his ground with a warm smile as he looked at Lin Feng. He asked what sounded like a simple question. What was his relationship with Professor Ling Shan? The sudden inquiry caught Lin Feng completely off guard. For a second, he just stared blank-faced, thinking that the director was saying something utterly strange. As he studied the man's expression, he realized the director hadn't discovered his hidden occupation at all. Relief washed through him. Just moments earlier he'd worried his restricted necromancer ability had somehow been exposed. Steadying himself, he replied with a polite smile, saying that Ling Shan was his father and asked if the director knew him. The director's eyes widened in surprise. He muttered that Lin Feng was actually the son of an old friend, and suddenly everything, especially the resemblance, made sense. He then asked if Lin Feng planned to enroll in the academy. When Lin Feng nodded, the director stepped in closer with an encouraging tone, telling him that if anything caused trouble, he could rely on his uncle, who would gladly help or pull strings if needed. Right then, the confident girl behind the director stepped out, clearly unhappy. Though her voice shook, she still spoke sharply, asking why he was acting so absurdly in front of everyone. Whispering broke out around them as the students exchanged comments. One boy muttered that all he'd done was make one small remark, yet the director kept praising Lin Feng like he was some big deal. Another snickered that Lin Feng was probably just pretending to be tough despite having a farming occupation. Ignoring all the noise around him, the director turned back to Lin Feng and told him he had business to attend to. He promised that once Lin Feng officially enrolled, he'd personally show him around the academy. A moment later, the man simply vanished. Lin Feng blinked at the empty spot, wondering why the director felt oddly unreliable. On another side, the lady instructor regained order. She called for the students who passed the primary test to follow her, and encouraged those who failed not to lose hope. They would have another chance. Scene shift to investigation room. A man glared at a target board covered with files. His sharp gaze locked onto the profile of Du. His voice rose suddenly, declaring that two names must not be forgotten, Yui and Hai Xiao, who had both ended up as servants of the unknown prodigy. He continued in a low, cold tone, saying that Du must have uncovered Hai Xiao's secret. Something must have happened during the investigation, leading both sides to annihilate each other. But he insisted there was still a mastermind behind everything, the one who stole Hai Xiao's inheritance talent. His excitement flared as he slammed the board, convinced he had found the key. Locating whoever took the Necromancer talent would uncover the whole truth. Meanwhile, another investigator rubbed his temples in frustration, telling Tuka to stop forcing brainless conclusions just for credit. He had no idea Tuka was accidentally piecing together the actual truth. Tuka burst in anger, shouting that no one believed him, but he would find evidence no matter what. A nearby girl whispered nervously that maybe they should stop him, since he was one of the Duke men and letting him rampage around was not ideal. The academy was supposed to be for training allies, not stuffed with people just trying to gain credentials. At that moment, the director stood. His voice cut through the tension with absolute authority. If Hai Xiao is found, he is to be killed on sight. The men exchanged heavy glances but nodded. One of them asked what they should do if Hai Xiao was already dead. The director chuckled quietly, saying Hai Xiao might have changed identities entirely. So anyone using his necromancer skills should be eliminated, no exceptions. The scene snapped to the Extraordinary Academy's mission hall, where the pink-haired instructor stood before a restless crowd. She told the students that the retest required every newcomer to clear a level 5 special dungeon, the demonic beast's lair outside the city, with only 3 hours on the clock. Panic rippled instantly. One boy was shouting that they were only level 4 and had no business fighting anything in a level 5 dungeon. Another stammered that maybe they could wear down the final boss if they were lucky, but 3 hours was impossible. The instructor waved off their panic, saying they weren't expected to clear it alone. Teams of up to 5 were allowed, she added. Once formed, they just had to register with her, and their countdown would start. The hall erupted. Students were yelling for a frontline warrior, others were calling for healers, and someone even squeaked about being a cute supporter looking for big brothers to carry her. Through all the noise, Lin Feng didn't pay attention. He was quietly reviewing his stats, already calculating how he could handle a level 5 dungeon by himself. That was when a girl approached him. He glanced up, wondering what she wanted. She looked soft and round, almost kitten-like, yet her voice was steady when she introduced herself as a level 7 magic type. She told him she had watched his primary test and believed he was strong enough that she hoped to team with him. Lin Feng hesitated. A level 7 mage was powerful enough to solo the dungeon herself. If he were still a simple farmer, teaming up would be a dream, but he couldn't risk exposing his necromancer abilities. He apologized and said he preferred to act alone. Instead of being offended, the girls simply wished him luck and left. The instructor noticed him heading up next and called out, asking if he really planned to go alone. He insisted he was fine and asked for permission. She handed him the location scroll, eyeing him carefully as she asked if he was aiming for the solo clear reward. She passed him a black bear-shaped badge, explaining it was a reward that boosted low-level players like him but warned him not to overestimate himself. Lin Feng accepted it with quiet excitement. Moments later, he reached the dungeon entrance. An instructor guarding the gate frowned and asked where his teammates were. Lin Feng said plainly that he was entering solo. The man nearly choked, warning that the dungeon was too dangerous, but Lin Feng showed the black bear badge. The rules allowed solo entry. Other instructors murmured that he was definitely trying for the solo clear brave, maybe, but possibly reckless. Still, they stepped aside and wished him luck. Lin Feng walked inside. The tunnel was totally different from any dungeon he had ever seen. A crawling beast appeared ahead. He identified it as a level 3 or level 4 creature, nothing that could threaten someone at level 6. With a flick of his hand, he ordered He Sha and Yui, his undead generals, forward. The monster population matched the guidebook exactly. Good. It was the perfect opportunity to test his new summoning method. He activated undead summoning. Every fallen creature twitched, then rose as undead versions of themselves. At his command, they surged forward in a wave. From a stone ledge, Lin Feng analyzed them calmly. Monster form undead kept their original aggression but lacked real intelligence. They responded only to simple instructions but consumed far less mana. He even wondered if they could help with daily chores someday. He Sha snatched up a spear and skewered another beast. Yui chanted and blasted a charging monster away. Watching them, Lin Feng felt an unusual flicker of pride. They really were starting to look like reliable subordinates. Human form undead, he noted, were different. They retained the skills they had when alive and fought far more flexibly. Someday he could even leave farm work to them. His undead army ripped through wave after wave of monsters, rising past level 7. His strength was terrifyingly efficient. Within half an hour, he was already standing before the boss room. He muttered that it was good he could use a real challenge. Entering the deepest chamber, he was greeted by a thunderous roar and the sight of a massive beast bound in chains. He laughed, calling it perfect timing, and commanded his undead into formation. He Sha to restrain the front, Yui to weaken it with curses, the rest to target joints and eyes. The boss shrieked under the onslaught. Lin Feng casually sat on a rock and snacked on berries, remarking that their coordination was improving and that his generals were shaping up nicely. Once the monster weakened, one shadow grabbing a spear, he dashed forward, purple energy trembling through the chamber as he struck. The boss head shattered. The system flashed, level 8. He sifted through the remains and lifted a glowing item, unimpressed. Only 10 points in constitution. It wasn't even comparable to the buffs from his super crops. Opening his stat panel, he paused. The rewards, there were 2 sets. The dungeon had given him rewards for both of his occupations, farmer and necromancer. Dual rewards for dual classes. A sharp grin crossed his face as he realized that if the system worked like this, there were countless ways he could abuse it using his crops. Outside, a team waiting near the entrance froze when Lin Feng casually walked out of the dungeon. A student shouted in disbelief that he had cleared it alone. Lin Feng didn't react. He just approached the pink-haired instructor and reported his mission completion. She opened the scroll and froze. The detailed path and full clear were all recorded under his name alone. She shouted his name, unable to believe he had soloed the entire dungeon. Lin Feng answered her shock with a quiet, confident smile.